The HOA Karen cut off my power. But little did she know. She cut off the entire neighborhood's power. The peaceful, tree-lined streets of Maple Grove Estates had always been a symbol of suburban tranquility. Neighbors waved as they passed. Children played in front yards. And the hum of lawnmowers blended with the soft rustling of leaves. Life here was simple, predictable, and, most importantly, quiet. That is, until Angela Carter decided to run for HOA president. Angela was not your typical candidate. She had a polished exterior, designer sunglasses perched perfectly on her nose. A smile that always seemed just a little too perfect. And a habit of carrying around a binder full of proposals. At first, it seemed like nothing more than a routine election campaign. But when she started knocking on doors, her words began to raise more than a few eyebrows. "I'm here to restore Maple Grove to its former glory," Angela said. Her voice firm as she handed out pamphlets. "Some of you have allowed the standards to slip. And I'm here to fix that." Her eyes, however, would always linger on certain houses with noticeable solar panels on the roofs. One such house was Alex Roberts's, a new addition to the neighborhood who had installed solar panels just months before. Angela's gaze seemed particularly sharp when she passed Alex's home. The once warm, welcoming neighborhood was starting to feel more like a battleground. Rumors started circulating that Angela's definition of restoring glory had less to do with community spirit, and more to do with controlling the appearance of everyone's property, especially those pesky solar panels. Alex could feel the tension building. And it wasn't just the new president's promises that concerned him, it was the unsettling feeling that the peaceful neighborhood might be slipping into something far less welcoming. The morning after Angela Carter's election victory, the first change was already apparent. A new set of HOA rules arrived in every mailbox. Their sharp language cutting through the calm that had once defined Maple Grove Estates. The most glaring of these changes: a new clause prohibiting visible solar installations under the guise of maintaining the aesthetic integrity of the community. Alex Roberts had worked hard for the solar panels on his roof. The decision wasn't just about saving money, it was about contributing to a greener, more sustainable future. He'd gone through the proper channels, obtained all the necessary permits, and even received approval from the previous HOA board before installing the system. To him, it was a source of pride. But that pride quickly turned to frustration when he found a notice stapled to his front door one Tuesday morning. "Dear resident, it has come to our attention that your unauthorized solar installation violates our new architectural guidelines. You have 72 hours to remove these unsightly additions or face daily fines." The letter read, stamped with the HOA's official seal. Alex couldn't believe it. He immediately picked up the phone, calling the HOA office in a state of disbelief. Angela's assistant answered. But when Alex asked to speak to the new president, he was told she was too busy to discuss individual violations. Determined to resolve the issue, Alex went straight to Angela's house that evening. The door opened with a soft click, revealing Angela standing there, her perfectly styled hair gleaming under the porch light. Her gaze flicked over Alex with a practiced, almost dismissive look. "I suppose you're here about the violation notice," Angela said. Her tone cool, but just sharp enough to feel like an attack. Alex stood firm, pulling out the stack of approval documentation from the previous board, his frustration beginning to boil over. These panels were legally approved. You can't retroactively deny permission just because you don't like them. Angela raised a hand, cutting him off with a practiced wave. her smile barely reaching her eyes. "The previous board's approval doesn't matter anymore," she said. "Our new guidelines clearly state that visible solar installations detract from community aesthetics. You need to remove them." Alex's patience snapped. "The panels are staying. They're legal. And if you persist with these fines, I will challenge them legally." Angela's smile faded, her expression hardening. "Well, if that's your attitude, we'll handle it the official way," she replied coldly, slamming the door in Alex's face. Standing there on her pristine porch, Alex could feel the weight of the confrontation hanging in the air. He knew this wasn't just a small disagreement, it was a battle for control of the neighborhood. And he was ready for whatever came next. The following week was tense. Alex had hoped the issue would resolve itself. That maybe Angela would back down when she realized her actions were both legally questionable and potentially divisive for the community. But instead, things escalated. It started on a Tuesday afternoon when Alex was working from home, typing away at his computer when, suddenly, the lights flickered and the air conditioning cut out. At first, he assumed it was just a random power surge. But when he checked his phone, he saw the whole street had gone dark. Curious and concerned, Alex went outside, scanning his neighborhood. He was about to walk to the electrical panel when his neighbor Jeff came rushing up. "Is your power out too?" Jeff asked, looking confused. "I thought it was just us." Alex's heart sank as he realized something was wrong. He rushed to his electrical panel and what he saw made his blood run cold. Someone had deliberately cut the cables connecting his solar system to the grid. The severed lines lay in a tangled mess on the ground. And the air was thick with the sharp smell of exposed wiring. Alex's stomach churned, realizing that in her attempt to force him to remove the solar panels, Angela had made a grave mistake. As more neighbors emerged from their homes, Alex knew this wasn't just about his solar panels anymore, this was something bigger. He quickly pulled out his phone and dialed 911. The whole block was affected. And the damage was already clear. A power outage that large wasn't a simple inconvenience, it was a public safety hazard. Especially considering the elderly and medical equipment-dependent residents on the street. By the time the police arrived, it was clear this was no accident. Officer Martinez, who was leading the response, took one look at Alex's security footage and his expression grew serious. The footage clearly showed a figure in designer athleisure, Angela herself, approaching Alex's electrical panel with industrial wire cutters. Her actions deliberate and unmistakable. "This is a serious situation," Officer Martinez said as he reviewed the footage. "Tampering with electrical infrastructure isn't just vandalism, it's a public safety issue. This could have caused fires, blackouts, or worse. And the fact that it impacted the entire neighborhood, that makes the charges even more severe." Alex watched as utility trucks rolled in, the flashing lights lighting up the street. Neighbors stood in small groups, talking in hushed voices, trying to piece together what had happened. Angela, however, was nowhere to be found. As the investigation continued, Alex couldn't help but feel a small sense of vindication. Angela had gone too far. She had tried to enforce her rules with an iron fist. But in doing so, she had made a massive mistake. And now, with evidence in hand, Alex was ready to take the next step. The next morning, Alex felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and determination. He had spent most of the night helping neighbors document damages from the power outage. trying to account for every lost appliance, flooded basement, and refrigerator full of spoiled food. But today, things were moving faster than he had expected. The police had enough evidence to bring Angela in for questioning. At the police station, Alex was greeted by Detective Chin, a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes and a no-patience-for-nonsense attitude. She slid a cup of coffee across the desk toward him as she flipped through the stack of papers in front of her. "We've reviewed the footage," she began, taking a sip of her coffee. "And we've spoken to the utility company. What Angela Carter did wasn't just illegal, it could have been disastrous. We've already spoken with the residents who suffered from the power outage. Some of them had medical equipment that was dependent on electricity. Fortunately, backup generators kicked in. But that doesn't change the fact that Angela's actions could have been catastrophic." Alex nodded, feeling a sense of satisfaction that the investigation was moving quickly. "I have statements from 23 neighbors, including Mrs. Peterson across the street, whose refrigerator went out. The Jacobsons lost their fish tank. And the Smiths' basement flooded when their sump pump stopped working." Detective Chin raised an eyebrow, as she flipped through the statements. "This is thorough, Alex. And it's not just about the damage to your home anymore. We're looking at the impact on the entire community." As she spoke, her phone buzzed, and she took the call. When she hung up, she gave Alex a small, knowing smile. "Angela Carter is being brought in for questioning right now. And from what I've heard, she's not happy about it." Alex felt a sense of anticipation. Angela, so used to being in control, was about to face the consequences of her own actions. The thought was almost satisfying. He could already hear her voice echoing down the hallway of the police station, raised and indignant. "This is ridiculous. I was just enforcing HOA guidelines. That person clearly violated them." A calm male voice interrupted her tirade. "Mrs. Carter, I strongly advise you to stop talking until we're in the interview room." Alex couldn't suppress the small smile that tugged at his lips as he imagined Angela's once pristine composure cracking. Detective Chin, observing his reaction, allowed herself a small grin. "You're enjoying this more than I expected," she said with a wink. "I'm just glad she's getting a taste of her own medicine." Alex replied, as the sounds of Angela's heels clicking down the hallway faded. Detective Chin looked at Alex with a raised eyebrow. "I have to warn you, Alex. This case isn't over yet. HOA politics can complicate things. And Angela has more influence than she seems. But I've never seen someone so thoroughly document their own criminal activity before." Alex couldn't help but agree. Angela had overplayed her hand. And now, the fallout would be felt across the community. The worst part for Angela. The worst was yet to come. The following days unfolded like a scene from a dramatic news broadcast. The local station, eager to capitalize on the story, sent a crew to Maple Grove Estates to cover the fallout from Angela Carter's actions. The reporter stood in front of Alex's solar panels, a place that had once been a point of pride, now the symbol of Angela's overreach. "Sources tell us that Mrs. Angela Carter's actions may have violated federal law," the reporter announced, microphone in hand. "Additionally, documents have emerged showing this isn't the first time she's been involved in controversial HOA decisions. In fact, she was forced to resign from another HOA board 3 years ago after trying to implement similar, highly aggressive policies." Alex stood quietly in the background, watching as neighbors gathered. many with their own stories of damage to share. He could see the expressions on their faces: anger, disbelief, and, for some, a dawning realization that Angela had not only ruined their trust but had also endangered the safety of their community. That evening, the emergency HOA meeting was called. The community center's largest room was packed. Every seat filled. And standing room was completely occupied. Residents, once friendly but distant, now stood shoulder to shoulder, united in their frustration with Angela's actions. Alex was at the front, ready to speak. But it was clear this was no longer about just him and his solar panels, it was about something much larger. The HOA vice president took the floor, addressing the crowd with a stern expression. "Before we begin, I want to acknowledge the severity of recent events," she said. "The board has received dozens of complaints, and we're taking them very seriously." What followed was 3 hours of heated testimony. Neighbors detailed the thousands of dollars in damages caused by Angela's sabotage. Mrs. Peterson from across the street spoke about the losses in her refrigerator, while the Jacobsons and Smiths shared their stories of lost pets and property damage. A resident with medical equipment recounted the terrifying experience of losing power, relieved only by a backup generator that had kicked in just in time. Environmental experts also weighed in, explaining how Angela's interference with the solar panels had not only been illegal but had also cost the community money by disrupting the neighborhood's contribution to the energy grid. Angela, sitting at the front of the room, could no longer maintain her composed facade. Her attempts to defend herself only made things worse. "I was just trying to maintain our community standards," she protested, her voice rising in desperation. "Those panels are an eyesore." But then Mr. Johnson, the community accountant, stood up and interrupted her. "An eyesore?" he said with a sharp laugh. "Actually, that solar setup has helped reduce our community's overall utility costs. By damaging it, you've actually decreased our property values." The room grew silent, the weight of his words sinking in. But it was the final blow that sealed Angela's fate. The insurance company representative stood up and addressed the room. Due to the intentional nature of Mrs. Carter's actions, they began, "Our policy won't cover the damages. Mrs. Carter is personally liable for all repairs and resident claims." Angela's face drained of color as the implications of the statement settled in. Her lawyer, who had been whispering urgently in her ear, began gathering his papers. He was likely calculating how to minimize the damage to both her bank account and the potential criminal charges she would now face. The vote to remove Angela from the board was unanimous. The entire room erupted into applause as Angela, her composure shattered, fled the meeting in tears, her lawyer hurriedly ushering her out the door. As the crowd cheered, Alex felt a sense of relief wash over him. The community had stood up for what was right, and Angela's reign of terror was over. The changes that followed were nothing short of remarkable. The HOA adopted new, progressive guidelines promoting sustainable energy solutions, and other residents, previously hesitant, began installing their own solar panels. Alex's victory had sparked a shift in the neighborhood, one that embraced change, sustainability, and, most importantly, the power of a community standing together. Angela, unable to face the fallout, put her house on the market just 2 weeks later. Rumors spread that she was moving to a neighborhood without an HOA, perhaps to escape the very structure she had tried to control. The last time Alex saw her, she was supervising the movers, carefully avoiding eye contact with anyone on the street. It was almost poetic. Alex's solar panels were repaired. Stronger than ever. And every time the sun hit them just right, they seemed to shine a little brighter, as if they knew they had won. Every month when his reduced energy bill arrived, Alex couldn't help but smile. He didn't need to send Patricia a copy. Living well and sustainably was the best revenge. And that's the end of our story, folks. It's a tale of resilience, community unity, and standing up for what's right, even when it feels like the odds are against you. What do you think about Angela's actions and the way the community came together to push back? Do you think Alex did the right thing by fighting for his solar panels? Or do you have a different perspective? If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales of HOA drama, conflict, and the ultimate battle for justice, make sure to leave your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any of the exciting stories coming your way. Your support means the world, and I can't wait to share even more with you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.